Good morning, everyone. Thank you. The piano music you just heard is your signal to settle into your seats and prepare for the start of our worship service. Before we begin, I have a few quick reminders about your announcements, which you should have received when you came in. Number one is there are two meetings to choose from today. One is DRE, Director of Religious Education, Karina, is leading a lay leader training session for the social justice team members and anyone else who would like to participate in our church services, meeting immediately after the service today. A light lunch will be provided. Or if coffee and conversation is more your thing, stay after the service today to meet with the hospitality committee about reviving our coffee and conversation discussions and keeping the after-service coffee and snacks tradition alive. Just also a quick reminder about the Holocaust Remembrance film, January the 28th at 4, and the production of Thurgood at the Georgetown Playhouse this coming week until February the 18th. Please see your handout for other announcements. Good morning and welcome to San Gabriel Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Whether you are here in the sanctuary or if you are watching at home, we are so glad that you are here. My name is Billy Adams. My pronouns are she, he, and I have been a member of San Gabriel UU for the past 10 years. In addition to serving as lay leader, my joy is in working with our habitat team that plants the plants that you see in our gardens for sustaining wildlife. Today, I'm happy to introduce our guest speaker, Eric Hepburn, whose pronouns are he, him. He is a friend of San Gabriel and a community lay minister from Austin. Welcome, Eric, and thank you for being with us today. San Gabriel UU is a member congregation of the UU, Unitarian Universalist Association. There are over 1,000 UU congregations in the United States, and all of us are working for a just, a peaceful, and a sustainable world. Sustaining each other here in community is the first step down the long road of that important work. We especially welcome our guests today. If this is your first time here, thank you for coming. We hope you will stay for coffee and conversation after the service today. If you would like to know more about us and learn about upcoming events, please fill out the voucher that you will see in the pockets in the back of the seats in front of you to sign up for our newsletter. It's not that hard, really. Please know that whoever you are, wherever you are from, whomever you love, wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. Let us greet this day in song. Our opening hymn is There Is More Love Somewhere, number 95 in the gray hymnal, and the lyrics will be projected on the wall behind me. Please rise in body or spirit if you are able, and we will sing all 4 verses.
As we light our chalice, we create a sacred space together. I call you into this time of connection within, among, and beyond with the words of Amy Ray. A bullet in the head, now he's dead. A friend of a friend, someone said. He was an activist with a very short life. I think there's a lesson here. He died without a fight. In the war over land where the world began. Prophecies say it's where the world will end. But there's a tremor growing in our own backyard. Fear in our heads. Fear in our hearts. Prophets in the graveyard.
Our affirmation is an expression of our covenant with one another. Please read after me, and the words will be projected. The doctrine of this church is love.
We are here to love.
The quest of truth is its sacrament.
We are here to learn.
Service is its prayer.
We are here to care for others.
To dwell together in peace.
We are here to live in peace.
To seek knowledge and freedom.
We are here to honor our differences.
To the end that all souls shall grow in harmony with the divine.
We are here to grow.
Thus do we covenant with one another.
This we promise to do together.
And now it's time for our Wonder Box, and I believe that Karina is on her way here to tell you about it.
Right. We use love our wondering minds, and we help each other learn and grow when we listen to one another. So if you've got a guess, maybe together we can figure out what is in this wonder box. I'm going to shake it. A little bit noisy today. Anybody have any ideas? Cards? Crayons? Paper, Play-Doh. We've got lots of art. So we've got an arts and crafts theme going, which is actually really, really good. Are we ready to open it up? Do you want to open it up? A little paint box. What does that make you think of? Different colors? Any thoughts? What a paint box might represent? Creativity, colors of the earth, differences. All right, well, let's see what our story is going to tell us about colors today.
One, written and illustrated by Catherine Otoshi, published by K.O. Kids Books. Blue was a quiet color. He enjoyed looking up at the sky, floating on the waves, and on days he felt daring, splashing in rain puddles. Every once in a while, he wished he could be more sunny like yellow, or bright like green, more regal like purple, or outgoing like orange. But overall, he liked being blue, except when he was with Red. Red was a hothead. He liked to pick on Blue. Red is a great color, he'd say. Red is hot. Blue is not. Then Blue would feel bad about being blue. Sometimes Yellow comforted Blue. Blue is a very nice color, she'd say. But Yellow never said that in front of Red. She never said, "Stop picking on Blue." Green, purple, and orange thought Blue was nice too, but they never told Red to stop either. Every time Red said something mean and no one spoke up, he got bigger and bigger and bigger. Soon Red grew so big that everyone was afraid of him. No one dared stop him. Red picked on all the colors. Then everyone felt a little blue. Until one came. He had a different shape with bold strokes and squared corners. He was funny. He made the colors laugh. Red saw this and got very hot. Stop laughing, he told Yellow. Stop laughing, he told Green. Stop laughing, he told Purple and Orange. And they did. Red rolled up to one. Stop laughing, he told him. But one stood up straight like an arrow and said, no. Red was mad, but one wouldn't budge, so Red rolled away. One turned to the colors and said, if someone is mean and picks on me, I, for one, stand up and say no. Then Yellow felt brave and said, me too. Green agreed and said, me three. Then Purple became 4 and Orange became 5. Blue saw the colors change. He wanted to count. Red grew red hot. He felt left out. He got hotter and hotter and hotter. Red raced over to Blue and said what he always did. Red is hot, Blue is not. But this time Blue stepped tall and became 6. Red can be really hot, he said, but Blue can be super cool. Red blew a fuse and tried to roll over Blue. But everyone took a stand and said no. Seeing them standing tall made Red feel very, very, very small. Then Red turned even redder and began rolling away. Blue called out, can Red be hot and Blue be cool? Red stopped in his tracks. Red can count too, said one. Red rocked and rolled and turned into 7. Everyone counts, they shouted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then Red laughed and joined the fun. Sometimes it just takes one. The end.
Oh, you like that story? Gonna applaud for that story. There's quite a lot of color and word play in that story. Red being hot, blue being cool, one standing up for oneself, and then colors transforming, turning into numbers. And I like how the author showed that transformation taking place, that the colors literally took on a new shape, the shape of a number, so they could be counted to show we all count. I think that standing up and being counted is something that Dr. King asked of us, that so many prophets ask of us. And I think Eric is going to speak more to that today. And we'll talk a little more about that in our time together as well. Any children here today, we are going to go out into our little house and spend some time together. We ready to go? All right, let's go.
Good morning. All right, I got a sermon written here. I'm going to get to it in a minute, but I got to diverge for a second. So there's a concept that comes out of Buddhism called a near enemy. And the near enemy is the thing that sounds like wisdom but isn't quite. It's more like a red herring, if you want to think about it as a spiritual red herring. And I was thinking about a particular spiritual red herring when we sang our first hymn this morning, There's More Love Somewhere. I wanted to share that with you. I think I've felt the vibe in the room correctly, and I know that for many years when I sang that hymn, I was looking out there for the more love. And I was looking out there for the more peace and the more hope and the more joy. And that is an alienating way to look at that invitation. It is a near enemy. It's a red herring. The next time you sing that hymn, instead of asking, where is that stuff out there outside of me, I'm going to encourage you to ask, what is it in me that's blocking my access to those things? Because the more hope isn't out there, it's here. The more love isn't out there, it's in here. And when you find that way to unlock it on the inside, you will also see it reflected back to you from your siblings. But I think it's a dangerous thing, right? We write words. We hope that those words capture the truth, but they rarely do. Sometimes they're better pointers. Sometimes they're slightly less good pointers. But when we get the wrong idea in our heads about what we're pointing at, sometimes instead of leading us home, it leads us astray. All right, now I got words written. Let's go do that. Thank you for having me back. It's good to be back here at Sam Gabriel. Last time we were together, the week before Christmas, we talked about Jesus. We brought in Marshall Rosenberg's work on nonviolent communication and Alfie Kohn's work on rewards and punishment, and we used that to discern the religion of Jesus from the religion about Jesus. Now, from your feedback, that seemed to resonate with y'all, so we're going to try something similar today in honor of MLK Day, which was this past Monday. Now, I propose to you that the same injustice done to Jesus by his followers is paralleled in the way we typically celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day. MLK was a prophet who put the movement and the truth and the message and the people he served above his own needs and his own safety. Yet the holiday has devolved into a celebration of his personality, turning him into a safe idol of black excellence. Now, to be sure, Dr. King was both black and excellent, but I also think that like Jesus, he has been neutered and idolized in the retelling, in the reinterpretation. We've drawn a box called civil rights leader and put him inside that box, keeping his prophecy racialized and his contributions confined in racial terms. And as long as Dr. King is simply a spokesperson for oppressed black people, he is relatively safe. And so we have reduced him to that and tried to keep him there. Let's hear a bit from Dr. King in his own words in the aftermath of President Kennedy's assassination. Ours is a climate filled with heavy torrents of false accusation, jostling winds of hatred, and raging storms of violence. It is a climate where men cannot disagree without being disagreeable, and where they express dissent through violence and murder. So in a sense, we are all participants in these horrible acts. By our silence, by our willingness to compromise principle, by our constant attempt to cure the cancer of racial injustice with the Vaseline of gradualism, by our readiness to allow arms to be purchased at will and fired at whim, by allowing our movie and television screens, my son would add, and video games, to teach our children that the hero is one who masters the art of shooting and the technique of killing. By allowing these developments, we have created an atmosphere in which violence and hatred have become popular pastimes. Let's go back to Jesus for a second. If his murder, his assassination, is supernaturally required by the story we tell about him, then it isn't a tragedy anymore. It isn't an act of malice and cowardice and bile and villainy. It literally becomes a part of the act of salvation. I reject that. His assassination was just that, the politically motivated murder of someone whose influence and message about the transformational power of love made him dangerous. So he was murdered. Not murdered to save our souls. He was murdered in the self-serving and venal interests of those who claimed as their birthright the right to subjugate and exploit other human beings. And so it was with Dr. King, in my humble opinion. Having garnered some victories on the civil rights front, his attention began to turn to America's economic system of exploitation. He began to see and to speak about the evils of poverty, the evils of a system that uses racial division to distract attention from the classist exploitation of poor and working people, regardless of race. He began to see and to speak about the evils of militarism and the use of violence against human beings in both domestic and foreign contexts. He began to see the deep truth of Jesus' wisdom. Quote, I tell you the truth. Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me. There is no freedom for any of us greater than the freedom of the least of us. It cannot and will not be otherwise, despite our protestations and illusions and wishes to the contrary. You will not find peace while your siblings are being slaughtered in Ukraine and Gaza and Chicago. In Dr. King's words from his address to Southern Methodist University in 1966, quote, God is not interested merely in the freedom of black men and brown men and yellow men, but God is interested in the freedom of the whole human race and the creation of a society where all men will live together as brothers. Every man will respect the dignity and worth of human personality. And so that is the need to stand up. That is the need for all people of goodwill in this nation to become involved participants. For all too long, we have had silent onlookers, but now there must be more involved participants who solve this problem and get rid of this one huge wrong of our nation. There must be a kind of divine discontent. You know, there are certain technical words in every academic discipline which soon become stereotypes and cliches. Every academic discipline has its technical nomenclature. Modern psychology has a word that is probably used more than any other word in psychology. It is the word maladjusted. It is the ring and cry of modern child psychology, and certainly we all want to avoid the maladjusted life. We all want to live a well-adjusted life in order to avoid the neurotic and schizophrenic personalities. But I must say honestly, there are some things in our nation and the world for which I am proud to be maladjusted and wish all men of goodwill would be maladjusted until the good society is realized. I never intend to adjust myself to segregation and discrimination. I never intend to become adjusted to a religious bigotry. I never intend to adjust myself to economic conditions that will take necessities away from the many to give luxuries to the few, leaving millions of people smothering in an airtight cage of poverty in the midst of an affluent society. I never intend to adjust myself to the madness of militarism and the self-defeating effects of physical violence. End quote. Now, with this in mind, I want to share with you again the words from Amy Ray. A bullet in the head, and now he's dead. A friend of a friend, someone said. He was an activist with a very short life. I think there's a lesson here. He died without a fight. In the war over land where the world began, Prophecies say it's where the world will end. But there's a tremor growing in our own backyard. Fear in our heads. Fear in our hearts. Prophets in the graveyard. That lyric comes from the song Jonas and Ezekiel by the Indigo Girls. And it wasn't written about Dr. King. It was one of two songs, the other being Chapel Hill by Sonic Youth, written about the murder of Bob Sheldon on February 21st, 1991. Bob was a peace activist who ran a well-known bookshop in Chapel Hill, North Carolina called The Internationalist. During the first Gulf War, Bob, an outspoken critic of the war and community organizer, was murdered while closing up his store. The killer was never found. Many in his community suspect assassination. Here are Bob's own words. I believe they echo the direction Dr. King was headed before his own assassination. We are dedicated to the position that we have no country. We do not support mindless patriotic pleas for national unity, nor are we interested in keeping America number one. We support the unity and liberation of oppressed people worldwide and are working toward the day when all oppression and inequality will be removed from the earth. End quote and amen. I want you to hear these echoes. From 1963, ours is a climate filled with heavy torrents of false accusation, jostling winds of hatred, and raging storms of violence. It is a climate where men cannot disagree without being disagreeable, and where they express dissent through violence and murder. From 1991, there's a tremor growing in our own backyard. Fear in our heads. Fear in our hearts. These words, these sentiments are as palpable and relevant today as they were the day they were written. One could argue that they will always resonate because people are people and we're only human. I hope that you, like me, experience a deep revulsion toward that idea. I hope you see it as the near enemy and red herring that it is. I hope that you have an innate sense that it is not only untrue, but that it is toxic to the healing that we need with and from and among each other. Maybe there are only a few Buddhas and Jesuses and Gandhis and Martin Luther King Jr.'s in the world. Maybe, but there are hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of Bob Sheldons out there right now. People working in their communities to promote a culture of love and respect and mutual interdependence. And like Bob, many of them are killed for it. And it is them who we honor as prophets in the graveyard. In my reading of history, there's another observation about our murdered prophets that I want to share. And I don't like it, but I'm going to share it anyway. The assassination of prophets is effective at stalling our collective progress and healing. It delays our ability to create the better world that we dream of for our children. For every disciple or follower who steps up in the wake of those murders to take on their own prophetic mantle, there are hundreds and thousands who lose hope, who lose their way, who just can't muster that vision of the brighter future that the prophet helped crystallize for them. Now, this is not to fall into the trap of dividing the world into prophets who matter and followers who don't. It is simply to recognize that our gifts, no matter what they are both rare and necessary. All right, I've got one more thread I want to tug on before I wrap up today. And I want to begin with an expression of sincere gratitude for San Gabriel's own DRE, Corinna Whitaker Lewis. Every time I preach here, Corinna sends me a Wonderbox story that helps me to catalyze and sharpen the message I'm working on, and for that, I am very grateful. Now, we've covered some ground since our story about the blue ball and the red ball and the number 1, but let's go back there. Let's use that allegory to excavate some deeper truths that might be getting in the way of the healing we need, that might be keeping us stuck in these resonant patterns of toxicity and fear and violence. At the core of our story, we've got red. Red, am I right? Can you think of Can you think of a few people who red reminds you of? So insecure that they try to make themselves feel bigger by putting other people down. Try to tell themselves and others stories about why who they are and what they are like is better than everyone else, is best. Now, in Eckhart Tolle's work, we'd call this ego, and that is insightful and helpful, but I want to push us in a direction that ties more deeply into our theme this morning. And to do that, I'm going to call on the work of Ernest Becker in his most influential book, The Denial of Death. Appropriate for the graveyard today. One of Becker's prime insights was the concept of an immortality project. This is the idea that we displace our fear of death, our fear of non-existence, our fear of not mattering, onto, which is one of the deepest sources of our own insecurity. And we take that and we project it onto a project or an organization or an identity that we see as deathless. If we become identified with that thing that isn't going to die, then we have, in essence, dodged our own death. So now, instead of an individual ego, we have a collective ego instantiated as an immortality project. So America, number 1, turns the nation state into an immortality project. And we hear narratives about the inferiority of everyone who isn't American. And we hear narratives about what people are like who are real Americans. And all of this is happening with that same toxic intensity that we sensed from Red's character in the story. Why? Because we have become alienated from death, alienated from grief. We don't know how to die, so we either kill or are killed. We don't know how to live, so we put all of our eggs in the basket of our country, our political party, workplace, church, town, state, favorite sports team. We pick something we think will last, and we lash ourselves to the mast, hoping to weather the storm of cruel mortality. But what we need in order to sit at the feet of our prophets instead of hanging them on crosses is to come to accept our own finiteness, our own temporariness. Then maybe we can learn to build institutions that also know how to die, and thereby understand better how to serve the life that we are. I don't want an America that lasts forever. I've read enough speculative fiction to know the recipe for dystopia when I see it. I don't want a Unitarian universalism that lasts forever. I want these things to live their best lives and die their best deaths and leave nutrients in the soil to grow the next generation of things. And that is one of the beautiful things about this story. Red loses his overinflated sense of entitlement and finds a place among the other colors and numbers. He isn't cast out. He isn't murdered. He's integrated into the community. And I think we all have a lot to learn from that. All right, let's pause here and take a moment for reflection. We're going to open up for our process we call joys and sorrows. I'm going to hobble around here. I enjoy it. They told me if I saved up, I could get another boot look just like this for the other foot. So I'm looking forward to that because it's a joy to be back in this pulpit. I'm going to try something a little new. I'm going to add a third thing to joys and sorrows, which is I can stand up here and talk at y'all all day, and I do love it. I won't deny that I love it. But in addition to joys and sorrows that you might have brought in from outside, I want to invite you, not in paragraph long form, but in choice words, if you have a reaction, a reflection to what we talked about in the pulpit today, that you want to also say out loud and share with your siblings and with me, I would be grateful for that. So I'm going to open it up now for joys, sorrows, and reflections. You're going to make me walk all the way back there.
Hi, I'm Pat Berthold. I want to lift up the memory of Pam Taylor. If UU churches have pillars, she was a pillar of the UU church in Bakersfield, California. She was among the first to welcome Rob and I when we walked through their doors back in 1985 or 86. We traveled back to Bakersfield a couple of weeks ago for her memorial service, which was a sad occasion, but it was a joy because we got to be with that church family for a few hours, and that was wonderful. But Pam gave her best to the church. She was always on the hospitality committee and the welcome committee, and if you needed a project done, Pam was that person. So to Pam's memory.
Thank you. Did I make y'all shy? All right.
I seem to detect a trend. You speak a lot about grief and death. Matter of fact, we had a Thanksgiving service that sort of viewed Thanksgiving from the standpoint of the turkey. Is there a reason for that, or is there something going on in your life, or where does that come from?
Yeah. That's a great question. So I won't lie, there are things going on in my life that have led me to the path and the place where I am now. My sister died of an opioid overdose a little under 2 years ago. I am the same age right now that my mother was when she died of a brain tumor. And that was about, my son's 14, so that was 14 years ago. But I'll tell you something that I've discovered on my journey. And I've just barely become aware enough to know that my journey's not universal, right? It's kind of weird and unique to me, right? So this might resonate for some of y'all and might not for others. But what I said about the song we opened with was true. I spent a lot of time looking outside and wondering where the joy was. And in really dealing with the grief of the death of people who I loved and was very close to, and beginning to read and study people who were teaching about how to practice grief and how to get back into right relationship with dying and with our finiteness, I discovered some of my lost joy underneath that rock called grief. And it led me to a place where I feel like, as a culture, we don't like to think about that dark stuff. We like to pretend that it doesn't exist and not talk about it. And then we wonder why our lives feel shallow. I'll tell you, I was in a small group ministry. I'm teaching one at the First UU Church in Austin, and it's on a book called Die Wise by a guy named Stephen Jenkinson. And so we're reading this book together. And the way it got talked about actually by one of my colleagues in that group was when you cut off the keys on the left end of the piano, you stop playing the keys on the right side of the piano too, because they don't have anything to balance them out. And so what happens is you start saying, well, I don't want to go there. So you start narrowing, and next thing you know, you're just tapping out a rhythm on middle C. And you're wondering, where did my range go? Where did the rich tapestry of feelings and experiences that this life promises, where did those go? And I think it happens because we're afraid to stand on the dark side sometimes. But then we wonder where the brightness went. And I don't think we get to have one without the other. And so I definitely got there through my own personal experiences of pain, but my desire to make that public and help other people unlock that is because, and I do this when I do memorial services, look, I think you deserve to feel, and if we're talking about someone who you've lost, who's just died, I think you deserve to feel moments of complete and pure joy when you remember those amazing special times that you had together. And I don't believe it's possible unless you're willing to let down the facade of being in control and really lose it when you acknowledge that loss in your life. And I think we keep trying to have it both ways in this culture that we live in. We want to have the really good stuff and just keep that bad stuff. Can we just kind of ignore it, keep it over here? If I thought that was possible, I'd jump on the bandwagon. I don't think it's possible. And I think that we have to learn how to re-embrace grief in order to heal from the traumas that we live through, and in order to open up our ability to experience deep and lasting and meaningful joy in our lives. I think otherwise we end up wondering why everything feels so damn gray. Why is it that the highs don't feel as high as they ought to? And I think mostly it's because out of cultural habit and teaching and training, or maybe a lack thereof, we try to stay away from those low keys. Yeah.
Just recently, going through old pictures, an album of, they were black and white, very small. I came across a picture of our family, my mother, her two sisters, with her husbands, and these two cute little girls below. And one was me, and one was my sister, KT. And I look at the pictures, and I think most of the people in that picture are no longer with us. But what a wonderful journey we've had. There's so many good times. And I think about is that balance of life. And coming back here today, I haven't been here for several weeks. And having lost a long time a person that was very special in my life, Roy Benson, it was very hard walking through the door. Just there's so many memories because this place was such a sanctuary. And I always say thank you, Sharon Covey, because that was the person I saw on a Martin Luther King march in a bright yellow shirt. And I remember we're going up there, because Roy and I had just realized after moving here what a conservative area we had moved into. And we saw them, and I marched over there. And I know y'all have heard this story before when I've been lay leader, but I love it. I never get tired of it. And I said, do you mean to tell me there's a UU church here in Georgetown? And she just laughed, and yes, there is, and come visit, and the rest is history. And the other side of that, the joy, is all the wonderful times I know that Roy had here, and how much love he had for his men's group, and being on the caring committee, and helping people, and just looking around and thanking John Walker, who made that announcement when I knew I wouldn't be able to do it. That's all. I'm very happy to be here.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Diane.
I appreciated, Eric, your reminder that we do live in cultures that can become toxic and deadly. And it reminded me through the story and what you shared this morning, how easy it is for us these days to draw kind of a line across humanity, where good people are on one side and bad people are on the other, or successful people are on one side, failures are on the other, or the maladjusted are on one side and the well-adjusted on the other, and where we see ourselves in that. But I was reminded this week, Michelle was part of this group in Georgetown, a small fledgling group working with Helping Hands, decided that we could do something in Georgetown to provide a warm shelter for the homeless in our community who are living outside in the elements when it gets below freezing. And they rallied and they created a warming shelter in just a matter of a day or two. And they had 9 or 10 the first night. We stopped by there last night and saw there was about another 14 or 15 there. And Michelle spent the first night down there when they first opened it. I was home enjoying being in our bed, warm. She was on a cot down there with a couple of blankets. But when she came home, the story she was telling about the interactions with these homeless folks who were there, and she spent the evening, they didn't immediately just come in and go to bed, they were talking over a meal, and she came home telling me stories about the kind of folks that she encountered, and they weren't under the line of maladjusted or failures or people that just to feel sorry for, but they were real human beings, had real needs, and were really very wonderful folks. And she lit up as she told those stories. So your sermon this morning reminded me it's too easy for us to draw this line and separate people rather than seeing our common humanity. So thank you.
Going once. Oh, yes, ma'am.
Hi, y'all. My name is Daniela. I go to Southwestern right down there. I've never been here before, so it's nice to see all of y'all. I come from a Baptist church in Houston, Texas, and to say that as a black young woman in this state, that was a very interesting way to grow up. And so to come in here and hear, especially a message about MLK that does recognize he was assassinated and his work was unfinished, that was very beautiful for me to hear today. And then as well, just, I don't know if y'all ever have these things where God and just makes everything line up, but you just see things throughout your life that kind of connect in one place. But I was scrolling on Instagram, and there was a little post that said, you know, in the world today, you're supposed to feel crazy. You're supposed to feel maladjusted. This is craziness that's happening. This is not what it's supposed to be. And even in one of my classes the other day, my professor almost suggested that with hierarchical systems are naturally oppressive systems. And I just had to look at that and send him an email and say, I don't think so. I think that hierarchy can exist outside of oppression. I think MLK and a lot of our leaders in this way would agree with that, that you can have a position of leadership and not oppress those below you. There can be a system in which we all exist together, and we do have to protest against the oppressive part, and that oppression is not innate to being human. So I am so glad to hear all of this today, and thank y'all for having us.
I said a lot of times this morning to myself, Bill, shut up, don't talk, don't talk. But I'm so, I'm so moved by this experience today that I just felt like that I needed to share what I was feeling. Yesterday in this very room, we had our small connections group. And something of the same spirit occurred during that meeting. There were about 8 or 10 of us, and we got real. I mean, we shared our joys and our griefs and our sorrows, and we talked about death. And one of our members said, in reflecting about what he needed from the church, he said, "This is church to me," meaning that what we were experiencing yesterday in that connections group is what church meant to him. And I started to say to him, yeah, but that can't happen with 40 or 50 people. But friends, I feel like it has happened here today. We've sort of scratched the surface of something. And Eric, I think that you're letting us into your life in honesty has helped us to do that. And, we all experience that need to be self-revealing at different levels, and that's okay. We're not all blue, we're not all red, we're not all green, and so forth. But this is what church means to me. And so I'm happy that I came out today. I really thought about not coming out today because of the weather and so forth. But there's a little bit of my wife is coughing, and I think that means I've talked too long. But there's a little song that says, "It's about people, some people I knew." Because when we were going on our trip this summer, that's what I wanted to do, was reconnect with people. And she wanted to go to places. And so that's what the song said, it's about people. And so that's the way I feel about being here this morning. And it's like we've really gotten down to the place where we live. And so thanks to you, and thanks to all of you.
All right, any final thoughts before I call it? All right, I'm calling it. You can't show up alone. So we show up together, or we don't. As a meditation on the joys and sorrows and reflections that we just heard, let us sing "Where My Free Spirit Onward Leads," number 324 from the Gray Hymnal. Please rise and body your spirit as you are able. We will sing all 3 verses.
We take an offering each week to sustain this space that we call home and to support the work of our fellowship. If this is your first time here today, please feel free to let the place pass you by. Your presence this morning is your gift to us. Thank you for coming. If you filled out a visitor card, you can put it in the basket when it comes by. The offertory music today was written by two different composers, 130 years apart. J.S. Bach in 1722 wrote Prelude in C major. Charles Gounod wrote a counter melody named Ave Maria in 1859. The two melodies fit together when played at the same time, and I've heard this is a real challenge. And Jackie Karash will play Bach's Prelude, and Joe Neschheim will play Gounod's Ave Maria at the same time. The offering will now be greatly received, and we thank you.
We close our sacred time together when we extinguish our chalice. I offer you this poem written about Bob Sheldon by Liz McGeechee as a benediction. Grief. I never used to dream of you. Now I see your face nightly. You are with me when I close my eyes, still there when I awake. Your face, your hands, your beautiful hands. I used to watch them when you wrote, small but firm, determined. and you moved them when you spoke, gracefully, almost delicately. You were a radical, a man with a message. You argued for a better world, a just world, and the message was strong. Over the years, 1,000 voices mingled with yours in desperate juggles of understanding. And those same voices rose up in a wail of grief and anger when they found you face down on the floor. No, not this one. This isn't just. We need his voice. We need his voice.
We have one announcement. Michelle, if you could come up. Michelle Augustine.
Well, that's not exactly true. It's Michelle after all. Good morning, everybody. It's been quite a morning, hasn't it? Yes. Very, very emotional. And Eric, buddy, you've given me a new adjective. I can now describe myself as maladjusted. That's my new word. Folks, we have some exciting times upon us. So Spoon will be doing his historiography next week, so please do stick around after service. Afterwards, as you noticed in our announcement, there's a very special film that's been a collaboration between Havurah Shalom and the United Methodist Church. What I am seeing as I go to our Georgetown Ministerial Alliance meetings, there's a movement going on. There's a real change in wanting to be very interactive amongst our faith congregations and not so proprietary. So keep that in your thoughts and your prayers, that the hope and the peace that we really do have. You may realize that some of us were organizing a trip to go to the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Houston. We've had a change in date. We are planning on leaving Tuesday the 30th in the morning, touring the museum that afternoon, and staying overnight. So we do have a few rooms. We're going to try to go in 2 cars. So if you have any interest in that, please see me or Lou about that. Black History Month is approaching, and you will notice that there are posters here on the wall. I encourage you to take a look at those. Those are a result of last week's service, where we were analyzing what is institutional structural racism versus personal racism. So I know it's not a happy topic, but it is one that keeps us, we want to keep that education and awareness going, and for our racial justice and equity here at this congregation. Thank you, Lou, for bringing up those who we prefer to call them our unsheltered neighbors, our unhoused neighbors. When I use the term homeless, an image may come to your mind, and what Lou is trying to describe is that's no longer the image that's true and that's out there. Not all the neighbors are drug users, and met a variety of different folks with different stories. So yes, we are celebrating that Georgetown offered the first freeze night shelter in our county. And so we're hoping to build on that success. We'll keep you posted. But Keith stayed overnight, Friday night, so check with him about his experience. And Keith and I are very proud to be your representatives this week. On Thursday night, we are going to go out in the elements and look for, observe, and count those who are unsheltered, unneighbored. And the importance of that is that count gets aggregated statewide. And that's the count that gets used for funding sources that go back to things in places like the Caring Place and Helping Hands, the services that provide help for those in those situations, those facing eviction. So know that your church is out there and it's being well represented in our community. So I thank you all for those kind of supports. Do refer to this today. Thank you. Yes, Jan. I just need to announce the lay leader lunch. Because every time we do this, people go, where is the Oh, right. Where are we going to be in the fellowship house? The second building beyond. Yes. This little building here, there's another big building there. We welcome anybody who wants to come right after you get a beverage. Yes, get your snacks, bring it over. We have light lunch. Anybody is welcome to come. You're not committed to be a lay leader, but we hope to employ folks and get you engaged in that way to be part of our services. So yes, we're going to meet after shortly in our fellowship house, the second little house. Okay? Thank you all. Great day.
Many thanks to give today. Thank you, Eric, for being here with us again. Thank you, our beautiful, favorite, fantastic musicians. Thanks for all the people in the congregation. Please go and enjoy coffee and conversation. Peace and love.
So I think it'll just be a couple